Okay, we'll begin. Hare Krishna, glad to be back. And today we will cover chapter 8 of canto 2, the questions by Pariksit Maharaj. Very wonderful chapter, because this chapter will form the basis of the questions that Pariksit Maharaj asks in this chapter will become the basis for the entire Bhagavatam, because these questions will be answered throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a very important chapter. So, but before we hear about chapter 8, let us take some time to summarize what we heard in chapter 8. And before, in chapter 8, as we may recall, we heard about the Leela avatars of the Lord. But before Pariksit Maharaj heard about the Leela avatars, he had heard from Shukadeva Goswami about the Lord's dealings with the material world. Because the Lord, he personally comes and then also through his expansions, the Purusha avatars, right? Now this is very wonderful. So after hearing how Krishna was everything in the material world, how everything sprung as a spark of his splendor, then Pariksit Maharaj hears how the Lord enters into the material world through his Leela avatars. So Brahma, after describing that, he surrenders to the Lord, showing that no matter how smart we are, we need to surrender to the Lord. Pariksit Maharaj had asked many questions in chapter 4 and then in chapter 5 and 6 about the Lord's relationship with the universe. Because people generally conceive of the Lord as the creator of the universe, which implies that he existed before the creation. And if he existed before the creation, what was he doing? Was he just waiting for the time of the creation? No, he has so many pastimes that has nothing to do with the creation. And also the question, when he was creating, was he alone? So actually in the last few chapters, we heard about the relationship between Krishna and his energies. Krishna's dealings with the spiritual and material energies is so wonderful because he displays himself so far beyond who we are, because his pastimes are so wonderful, sweet. Krishna displays in the spiritual world his all-attractive feature as he deals with his own energies in a way that they are one with him in thought and action. For example, just like a king, when the difference between a king when he's in court or the king when he's in his own quarters with his family. When he's with his family, he's dealing with so much magnanimity. But when he's dealing with the prison house, he deals in another way, right? He is the heavy authority, making sure that everyone is working properly. But his sweetness comes out in his dealings with his own family members, in his own quarters. So in the same way, Krishna, in his ecstatic dealings, comes out in Vrindavan and also in Vaikuntha planets. And the material world is like a prison house that he deals with. Now, sometimes in the prison house, he may come as Leela avatars, just like a king may sometimes come to visit the prison house, and anyone he wants to give mercy to, he gives. That person becomes free. Similarly, when Krishna comes, in his Leela avatars, he also gives mercy. This is very, very wonderful. So after hearing this, Pariksit Maharaj, who was told by Shukadev Goswami what to do at the time of departure from this world, leading to one's death, focused on Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadev Goswami gave him that facility, and he wanted to hear more and more. So after glorifying the Srimad Bhagavatam in the first 6 verses in this chapter, now we're in chapter 8, Pariksit Maharaj asked in the rest of the chapters from text 7 to 23, many, many more questions. And these questions will be answered by Shukadev Goswami one by one throughout the Bhagavatam. There will be some that will be answered immediately in the 9th chapter. So we go to our first slide, which talks about where Brahma explains how the Vedic knowledge comes from Krishna through disciplic succession. I'm sorry, Shukadev Goswami will explain. After Pariksit Maharaj questions him. And what does he question him? How did Narad Muni, whose hearers are as fortunate as those instructed by Lord Brahma, explain the transcendental qualities of the Lord, who is without material qualities, and before whom did he speak? So in this purport, Prabhupada explains the disciplic succession and how advantageous that is, and how one can get authentic knowledge through the disciplic succession. He says that is the way of understanding Vedic knowledge. Devarshi Narad was directly instructed by Brahmaji, who was also directly instructed by the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the instructions imparted by Narada to his various disciples are as good as those of the Supreme Lord. That is the way of understanding Vedic knowledge. It comes down from the Lord by disciplic succession, and this transcendental knowledge is distributed to the world by this descending process. There is no chance, however, to receive the Vedic knowledge from mental speculators. Therefore, wherever Narad Muni goes, he represents himself as authorized by the Lord, and his appearance is as good as that of the Supreme Lord. Similarly, the disciplic succession, which strictly follows the transcendental instruction, is the bona fide chain of disciplic succession, and the test for such bona fide spiritual master is that there should be no difference between the instruction of the Lord originally imparted to his devotees and that which is imparted by the authority in the line of disciplic succession. How Narad Muni distributed the transcendental knowledge of the Lord will be explained in later cantos. Prabhupada is writing. Because you remember in the last chapter, one of the later verses, Brahmaji, after giving all the knowledge about explaining the Leela avatars, he told Narad Muni he told him that to take all the knowledge that he's given him and to distribute it to others. So in this way, this chapter begins with explaining how Narad Muni, eventually he's going to distribute this knowledge. We will hear in later chapters how he distributes his transcendental knowledge. But the point is being clarified that whatever he distributes is going to be as good as what Brahma gave to him, which is going to be as good as what Krishna gave to Brahma, right? So this is the power of disciplic succession, how it does not deviate from the original message. And that's why this is the only form of knowledge that one can, that is trustworthy and one can depend on as not being in any way contaminated, because it's coming from a perfect source. And the reason why it's a perfect source, because there was nothing before the Lord. The Lord existed even prior to this material creation. So he is the only one who can actually impart the truth, because there was no one before him. Just like, if you have to learn, the child has to learn something about the father's childhood, only the father can tell, right? So we'll move on to our next slide, which is in which Pariksit Maharaj asks Shukadev Goswami to continue narrating Srimad Bhagavatam. So these, like I said earlier, these are some verses in which Pariksit Maharaj glorifies Srimad Bhagavatam. So for him, Srimad Bhagavatam, he's already a self-realized soul. So he can really relish Srimad Bhagavatam. Actually, Srimad Bhagavatam is a literature for the Paramahansas, for the Mahabhagavats. When they hear Srimad Bhagavatam, they can actually realize it, and they can feel ecstasy. Just like Shukadev Goswami, he was an impersonalist before he became a personalist, after his father Vyasadeva instructed him in the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. But when he heard Srimad Bhagavatam, the way he understood it and realized it is very different from somebody who's just going up the ladder, who's a neophyte. So Pariksit Maharaj, he's showing so much eagerness to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. He's saying in text 3, "Oh, greatly fortunate Shukadev Goswami, please continue narrating Srimad Bhagavatam so I can place my mind upon the Supreme Soul, Lord Krishna, and being completely freed from material qualities, thus relinquish this body." So Prabhupada, again, these beautiful purports where he's talking about how one should not hear from professional reciters. And he speaks very vehemently against that. So Pariksit Maharaj, the reason why he's feeling so much ecstasy is because he's hearing from the right source. And we just talked about the disciplic succession. He can remember the Lord due to his association with Srimad Bhagavatam through the mouth of a pure devotee, Shukadev Goswami, who's in the line of disciplic succession. Regarding hearing from professional men, Prabhupada says in the purport that the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam performed by professional men is different from the transcendental hearing of Maharaj Pariksit. Maharaj Pariksit was a soul realized in the absolute truth, Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The fruitive material is not a realized soul. He wants to derive some material benefit from his so-called hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. Undoubtedly, such an audience hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the professional men can derive some material benefit as they desire, but that does not mean that such a pretense of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam for a week is as good as the hearing of Maharaj Pariksit. And then now we can go to our next slide. Sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam cleanses all material contamination. So Pariksit Maharaj is continuing with his glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. He's saying in verse 5, the sound incarnation of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Soul, that is Srimad Bhagavatam, enters into the heart of a self-realized devotee, sits on the lotus flower of his loving relationship, and thus cleanses the dust of material association, such as lust, anger, and hankering. Thus it acts like an autumnal rains upon pools of muddy water. Beautiful analogy. That's why I thought it's important to do this. So we can explain this concept, this verse through this analogy. And Prabhupada explains that analogy very nicely in the purport. Just like he's saying that how one devotee can deliver all the hundreds and thousands of fallen souls in the world. One person. And whereas, processes like austerity and jnana and all these things may deliver just one's own soul, may purify one soul, but when a pure devotee gives this message, it can deliver many hundreds. So and the comparison is made to the rain that falls on muddy water during the rainy season. The water becomes very muddy. But right after the rainy season, when the autumn hits, and there is a slight rainfall, then the muddy waters become clean. I don't know if you've seen that process, but I've seen it. Then, especially when somewhere where it really rains, and then right after the rains, the waters will become very clear. So in the same way, he's saying that this cleansing of the polluted heart, if we are doing it by other processes like mystic monastic, can simply cleanse one's own heart. But the devotional service of the Lord is so powerful that it can cleanse the hearts of the people in general. So it's a beautiful analogy. And if you read the purport, it's very clear what Prabhupada is saying. And he actually takes the analogy a little bit further, where he says that by adding some chemical, one can clean up a small reservoir of water. But then you cannot clean up rivers and lakes and things like that, right, by this small chemical. But a pure devotee can clean up, can deliver the entire reservoirs of water, which means he can deliver hundreds and thousands of people in his association. So that is the effect of a pure devotee reciting Srimad Bhagavatam versus professional man. And then he gives some wonderful examples in the purport of Narad Muni, Shukadev Goswami. These are the powerful personalities who can deliver hundreds and thousands of people. Lord Chaitanya, 6 Goswamis, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Prabhupada mentions his own Guru Maharaj. And of course, in his humble way, he did not mention himself, but then also Prabhupada, who delivered the entire world and gave this knowledge to hundreds and thousands of people who are benefiting even today. So we go to our next slide. In this, from here, Pariksit Maharaj asks many, many questions. His first question, we'll only deal with just the first question right now, first few questions. His first question, how does a spirit soul acquire a body? A very basic question, isn't it? So he says, O learned Brahmana, this transcendental spirit soul is different from the material body. Does he acquire the body accidentally or by some cause? Will you kindly explain this? For it is known to you. So even though it's a basic question, but not so easily understandable. And in this verse, Prabhupada explains very nicely how the soul is different from the body. So Pariksit Maharaj is asking, does a living entity acquire the body accidentally? Because we are ultimately the soul. And what is the cause of this identification with the body, which is so strong that we identify with it? That whatever is happening to the body, we think that it is us. So what is the cause of this? And Prabhupada in the purport, he explains so nicely, the way to get these answers of these questions is to first of all surrender and take shelter of the spiritual master. That is the first process. So Pariksit Maharaj is going to be asking many, many questions, but the process is to surrender to the spiritual master and inquire from him submissively. So Prabhupada writes, the first step is to take shelter of the spiritual master and then inquire from the spiritual master all about the process. This inquiry is essential for immunity to all kinds of offenses on the path of devotional service. Even if one is fixed in devotional service, like Maharaj Pariksit, he must still inquire from the realized spiritual master all about this. In other words, the spiritual master must always be well versed and learned so that he may be able to answer all these inquiries from the devotees. Thus, one who is not well versed in the authorized scriptures and not able to answer such questions should not pose as a spiritual master for the matter of material gain. It is illegal to become a spiritual master if one is unable to deliver his disciple. So Pariksit Maharaj is going to be asking so many questions. He's going to be asking questions at different levels, and we're going to hear that. So there are questions that are on a very personal level, and there are questions where he, individual questions that we're going to be hearing. And on another level, he's simply inquiring because he's curious to know. He's very curious, means this curiosity is not just mundane curiosity. It's spiritual curiosity where he wants to understand. He's enthusiastic. It's a sign of enthusiasm. He wants to hear about Krishna. It's not like the kind of armchair inquiry. Oh yeah, I'm just a kind of an intellectual thing. No. Instead of thinking that, oh, Srimad Bhagavatam, when is it going to be over? No, he's experiencing actually great happiness. What about this? What about that? He's asking, how does the living entity get his body? And this question that he just asked will be answered in chapter 9. So this inquiry, Prabhupada writes, is very essential in the path of devotional service because there's a process of devotional service. And to perform properly, one has to inquire. Otherwise, one can make many mistakes. And who do we inquire? We take shelter of the spiritual master. But he's saying the qualification of spiritual master is also needed. And so it becomes quite serious. So we move on to our next slide, where Pariksit Maharaj asks, what is the difference between the Lord's body and ours? And that's what is covered in verses 8 and 9, where he's asking, if the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whose abdomen the lotus stem sprouted, is possessed of a gigantic body according to his own caliber and measurement, then what is the specific difference between the body of the Lord and those of common living entities? So we've just heard in some chapters earlier about the body of Karnodakshaya Vishnu, right? From whose hair pores innumerable universes appear. We also heard about the body of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. From his navel sprouts a lotus stem in which all the planets of the universe remain. So the lotus stem is where all the planets are residing, and which the planets in the material universe are residing, and then which goes all the way up till Brahmaloka. And that's the lotus flower on which Brahma is born. So that when Brahma goes to find his source and he goes within the stem, he finds the entire gigantic universe. So in the creation of the material world, Prabhupada continues, the Supreme Lord undoubtedly assumes a gigantic body. And the living entities also get bodies, big or small, according to necessity. In other words, according to karma, right? For example, an elephant gets a gigantic body according to its needs. And so also an ant gets its body according to its needs. Similarly, if the personality of Godhead assumes a gigantic body to accommodate the universes or the planets of a particular universe, in other words, he becomes Virat Rupa. There's no difference in the principle of assuming or accepting a particular type of body in terms of necessity. A living being and the Lord cannot be distinguished simply by the difference in the magnitude of the body. So the answer depends on the specific significance of the body of the Lord as distinguished from the body of the common living entity. And then, of course, in text 9, he goes on to ask about, if Brahma is coming from the Lord, from his own navel, from the lotus, which is coming from the Lord, then is Brahma's body the same as the Lord's body? How can the body of Brahma be material then? But Brahma's body is not equal to the Lord, Prabhupada explains in the purport. This has to be clearly understood. Then they are of the same quality, but they're not the same, right? The body is different. His body is different. And why? Because Brahma is totally dependent on the mercy of the Lord. If they were equal, he would not be dependent. Because as soon as he was born, he didn't know what to do. And he had to perform austerities and please the Lord and then be empowered to create. So in our next slide, we'll move on to the other questions from Pariksit Maharaj. And all these questions will be covered from verses 10. We've already covered 7, 8, and 9, right? So that's where from 7, the questions begin and moves and goes on to 22. So I've, covered that in 2 slides, and I will just go very briefly through these questions and then go back to some of these and highlight just 3 of them, okay? So in text 10, Pariksit Maharaj asks, please also explain the personality of Godhead who lies in every heart as the super soul and as the Lord of all energies, but is untouched by his external energy. So basically he's asking about Paramatma. So what is the role of the Paramatma? And how he's, he keeps himself aloof from the external energy. Then in text 11, O learned Brahmana, it was formally explained that all the planets of the universe with their respective governors are situated in different parts of the gigantic body of Virat Rupa. I have also heard that the different planetary systems are supposed to be in the gigantic body of the Virat Purusha. What is their actual position? Will you please explain that? So he wants to hear about the planetary systems. So the Canto 3 covers many aspects of the creation. Like I said, it's covered in several parts of Bhagavatam, but it's always presented in a different angle. So in this way, we get many different versions, not versions, but angles by which we can understand gradually these topics. Then he wants to know about the time, the duration of time between creation and annihilation. And that also will be covered in Canto 3. And then also the measurement of time of different living beings, such as the difference of the duration of time of a demigod versus a human being. As we know that one day here is a year over there. How does, and these things he wants to hear. Then in text 13, he wants to know that, again, more about time, the details about time, the minutest form of time. Then he wants to know about the karma, which I will cover in a separate slide later, not right now, about karma and how that works upon different living entities. Then he asks about the different creation of the different heavens, the sky, the planets, the stars, the mountains, the rivers, the seas, the islands. He wants to know about the universe and the divisions. He wants to hear about the great souls and the different classifications of the castes and orders of life. That's in verse 16. And then in text 18, he wants to know about the religious principles that those in distress should follow. And then he wants to know more about creation, the cause of creation, the process of devotional service. He wants to hear more about mystic powers. And in verse 20, he wants to hear about the opulences of the great mystics. He wants to know how do they become detached from the subtle astral body. So in this way, he asks questions up to, verse 22. So we'll go back to, I think it's verse 14 on karma. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. So we'll go to karma, the question on karma, where he asks, how does karma work? How is it allotted, causing birth in different bodies? That's in verse 14. Pariksit Maharaj asks, Then again, kindly describe how the proportionate accumulation of the reactions resulting from the different modes of material nature act upon the desiring living being, promoting or degrading him among different species of life, beginning from the demigods down to the most insignificant creatures. So basically, he's asking that we are spirit souls. So how is it that we've been gathering karma for countless births that we carry with us? And how is it allotted? How is my karma allotted to me, which causes me to take one birth after another? In other words, how does karma exactly work? So Prabhupada explains in the purport how people, according to their different actions, they go to different places. So karma depends on two things, the desiring and deserving. We may desire a certain thing, but then we also have to deserve it, right? We may desire to go and ski in the Alps or somewhere, some beautiful place in Europe or something, but we may not have the money to go there, and we may end up somewhere very close by, depending on where we are, right? For example, in Idaho, there's a place called McCall. So we may end up there because we don't have enough resources to go to Europe, right? So it depends. So our desire is there, but then we have to deserve it. So karma. So Prabhupada talks how he explains how people, they desire different things, right? They desire to go to the heavenly planets. They desire to go to Pitraloka to meet their ancestors, right? And there are some people who are trying to want to come back to earth to improve their position here. They want to become powerful here. But there are some who want to go back to Godhead. So all these people can get the desired result, depending on what they deserve. Prabhupada is saying that how the various actions and reactions of work in the mode of goodness are generally known as pious work with devotional service, culture of knowledge with devotional service, mystic powers with devotional service, and at last, devotional service unmixed with any other varieties of goodness. So you note how nothing, even a mystic yogi or a jnani yogi will have to do some devotional service in order to get the desired result, in order to get what they want to get. Which means that ultimately, they may not be doing direct devotional service, but basically it means that ultimately they need to depend on the mercy of the Lord. Nobody in this world can get anything that they want without the mercy of the Lord. At some point, they will have to will have to go through that devotional process. In other words, they have to acknowledge the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, they could be trying and trying for lifetimes and lifetimes. So Prabhupada is further concluding that this unmixed devotional service is transcendental and is called Parabhakti. It alone can promote a person to the transcendental kingdom of God. So people can get their desired objective. However, they cannot get the ultimate goal, which is the kingdom of God. Only a person who does unmixed devotional service, which means pure devotional service, can go to that planet. Such a transcendental kingdom is not a myth, but is as factual as the moon. One must have transcendental qualities to understand the kingdom of God and God himself. So Prabhupada one time in some purport, he was explaining how sometimes when we want to go to the heavenly planets, we think it just means that whatever I'm doing here, it's just, there's going to be, I'll be doing the same thing, but there will be no headaches or suffering associated with that, In other words, we have to constantly worry about, paying our bills, right? So over there may not be any credit cards or any necessity to pay bills. People may think like that. That's what heavenly planet, going to a higher planet means. But actually, that is not a fact. Actually, what going to the heavenly planet means that the consciousness is finer there. So enjoyment is not based on sense object, but rather by a finer consciousness where your ability to enjoy is more finer and better. For example, and then he gives the example to explain this point. He gives the example of a pig. If you put a pig in a very beautiful surroundings with all types of fine things and luxuries, he cannot appreciate it, right? He cannot enjoy it no matter what you surround him with. So in the same way, the more fine and subtle one's consciousness is, the more he enjoys. So if someone in the mode of passion and ignorance, he cannot really enjoy. He's actually suffering. It's actually misery. So enjoyment is completely different, real enjoyment. So it depends on our consciousness, how fine it is. So peacefulness and satisfaction are some symptoms of real enjoyment. When you see a person very peaceful and satisfied, he's actually experiencing real happiness, real enjoyment. Because one cannot really enjoy if one is in anxiety. Of course, transcendental anxiety is different. Okay, so we just covered that, and so we move on to our next slide, which is for those in distress, what religious principle should they follow? Pariksit Maharaj is asking this in verse 18. So in other words, if people are in distress, do they have another set of principles they should follow? And Prabhupada explains that no, it is the only principle that is valid for anybody, even for people in distress, is devotional service. Why? Because he writes that how people following the principles of devotional service, in other words, the pure devotees of the Lord, can never be put into difficulty. And therefore, there cannot be any question of apad dharma or religion in distress. As will be explained in this book by the greatest authority, Srila Shukadeva Goswami says, there is no religion save and except the devotional service of the Lord, though this may be presented in different forms. Now, who is asking this question? This is Pariksit Maharaj, who's actually under great distress because he's going to leave his body in 7 days. He just left, he renounced everything. But not only that, he's going to die. But because his devotional service is so fixed, and he means that he's totally surrendered to Krishna, and he's living in Krishna's mercy, he's experiencing the affection of Krishna. And therefore, he's not really experiencing the misery of impending death. So in the same way, our test will also come one day, right? Because our test will come at the time of death, and we have to meet our test. So it depends on how much we can accept Krishna's mercy upon us and how much we can take shelter of him. And in this way, we can also transcend distress. Okay, so we'll move on to our next slide. Living in conditional life is like plying a boat on the ocean, but devotee is protected. So this is based on this verse 21, where Pariksit Maharaj is asking the question of how the living beings are generated, maintained, and annihilated. And he wants to know many other things, which we will cover in the following 2 slides. So this verse is very nice because it's an analogy which is very wonderful for our children to explain. So Prabhupada writes and explains this analogy about plying a boat in the middle of an ocean. Actually, it's very, very dangerous because as long as the weather is good, the boat can go on nicely. But how long? On an ocean, anything could happen, right? There's every chance of being drowned, even by a slight agitation. How can a little boat save itself, right? if there is a storm of wind or a cloud, there's every possibility of being drowned in the ocean. Because nobody can control the ocean. And actually, Prabhupada is writing based on his own experience. Right? Of course, he was in a ship. He was not in a little boat. However, he had to undergo, he saw many bad weather and how the ship was plying just based on the mercy of the Lord. And when Prabhupada was traveling on that ship, he was experiencing seasickness. So he had direct experience of what it feels like to be on an ocean. And he experienced 2 heart attacks during that time. So Prabhupada is explaining that if you are in a boat in the middle of an ocean, you really, it's a very dangerous situation. And how can you save yourself? But a person, a pure devotee, who has taken shelter of the Lord, he is protected. So Prabhupada writes, but one can ply over the ocean of material existence by the grace of the Lord very easily, without any fear of storm or fog. It all depends on the will of the Lord. No one can help if there is some unfortunate danger in the state of conditional life. The devotees of the Lord, however, cross the ocean of material existence without anxiety, because a pure devotee is always protected by the Lord. The Lord gives special attention to his devotees in their activities within material conditional life. Therefore, everyone should take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord and be a pure devotee of the Lord by all means. So we move on to the last 2 slides, and which the first one talks about the don'ts for those practicing devotional life. And this is very nicely explained in the purport. So this slide is based on Prabhupada's purport of verse 21, where he covers the do's and the don'ts of practicing devotional life. Don'ts for a devotee to learn. So some of the don'ts are: don't eat more than required, don't accumulate more money than needed, earn the livelihood honestly, don't talk nonsense, don't decry the creation of the Lord, calling it false and Krishna formless. So the Prabhupada writes in a very sweet way. So we will maybe hear a little bit from his purport. So he's quoting actually Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where he's saying that according to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the science of devotional service, one should not eat more than what one requires to maintain body and soul together. And then he explains about vegetable diets and milk. That's enough for the human body. Then he says one should not accumulate money to become puffed up in the material world. One should earn his livelihood easily and honestly, for it is better to become a coolie for an honest livelihood than to become a great man in society by hook and by crook. There is no harm if one becomes the richest man in the world by honest dealings, but one should not sacrifice the honest means of livelihood simply to accumulate wealth. Such an endeavor is harmful to devotional service. One should not talk nonsense. A devotee's business is to earn the favor of the Lord. Therefore, devotees should always glorify the Lord in his wonderful creations. So one should not talk nonsense. A devotee should not decry the creation of the Lord, defying him by saying that he has created a false world. The world is not false. Factually, we have to take so many things from the world for our maintenance. So how can we say that the world is false? Similarly, how can one think of the Lord as being without form? How can one become formless and at the same time have all the intelligence and consciousness, direct and indirect? So there are many things for a pure devotee to learn, and he should learn them perfectly from a bona fide spiritual master like Shukadeva Goswami. So these are the don'ts. So in our next slide, we'll cover the do's for the devotees to learn. And that's, again, I'll read a little bit from the purport. The one thing that Prabhupada is emphasizing is that the favorable conditions for discharging devotional service are that one should be very enthusiastic in serving the Lord. Enthusiasm. Why? Because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted the cult of devotional service to the Lord to be preached all over the world, in every nook and corner. And therefore, pure devotee's duty is to discharge this order as far as possible. Every devotee should be very enthusiastic, not only in performing his daily rituals of devotional service, but in trying to preach the cult peacefully by following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya. If he is not superficially successful in such an attempt, he should not be deterred from the discharge of his duty. Success or failure has no meaning for a pure devotee because he is a soldier in the field. Preaching the cult of devotional service is something like declaring war against materialistic life. There are different kinds of materialists, such as fruited workers, mental speculators, mystic jugglers, and so many others. All of them are against the existence of Godhead. So in this way, he covers all these points. So we'll move on to our next slide here. So now from slide from verses 24 to 26, Pariksit Maharaj, he humbly requests answer to these questions. He's actually begging for answers. And he's speaking in such a wonderful way. In text 25, he says that he doesn't want to hear from speculators, how Brahma is the first in disciplic succession. So he's hearing from Parampara. He's hearing from Shukadev Goswami, who's in the line of Brahma, all the way from Krishna. So in our last slide, we'll cover how Pariksit Maharaj glorifies Shukadev Goswami and compares him with other sages. That's very, very interesting. And that is in verse 25, where he's saying, "O great sage, you are as good as Brahma, the original living being. Others follow custom only, as followed by the previous philosophical speculations." So he's saying that how there are others, but they are simply philosophical speculators. And then Prabhupada elaborates in the purport who these others are. I will read a little bit of the purport. It may be argued that Shukadev Goswami is not the only authority of perfect knowledge in transcendence, because there are many other sages and their followers. Contemporary to Vyasadeva, or even prior to him, there were many other great sages, such as Gautama, Kanada, Jaimini, Kapila, and Ashtavakra, and all of them have presented a philosophical path by themselves. Patanjali is also one of them, and all these 6 great rishis have their own way of thinking, exactly like the modern philosophers and mental speculators. The difference between the 6 philosophical paths put forward by the renowned sages above mentioned and that of Shukadev Goswami as presented in the Srimad Bhagavatam is that all of the 6 sages mentioned above speak the facts according to their own thinking, but Shukadev Goswami presents the knowledge which comes down directly from Brahmaji, who is known as Atma Bhu, or born and educated by the Almighty Personality of Godhead. So why is his more authoritative? Is because he follows the disciplic succession. And this is where we began in the first verse, isn't it? So this really the essence of this chapter is hearing from the right source. O learned Brahmana, because of my drinking the nectar of the message of the infallible personality of Godhead, which is flowing down from the ocean of your speeches, I do not feel any sort of exhaustion due to my fasting. Suta Goswami said, thus Shukadev Goswami, being invited by Maharaj Pariksit to speak on topics of the Lord Sri Krishna with the devotees, was very much pleased. So on another level, Suta Goswami is telling the sages in Nimaisharanya how Pariksit Maharaj is speaking to Shukadev Goswami. And now he's saying to them that Shukadev Goswami was so happy to have such an eager disciple who wants to hear about Krishna. He began to reply to the inquiries of Maharaj Pariksit by saying, which means Shukadev Goswami, by saying that the science of the personality of Godhead was spoken first by the Lord himself to Brahma when he was first born. Srimad Bhagavatam is a supplementary Vedic literature and it is just in pursuance of the Vedas. And in the last text, he says, he also prepared himself to reply to all that King Pariksit had inquired from him. Maharaj Pariksit was the best in the dynasty of the Pandus, and thus he was able to ask the right questions from the right person. So I'll stop here. This was a little longer than usual. Thank you very much, and I'll give it over to Rati Preshta Mataji to do her part in explaining the guidebook.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for so beautifully and with illustrations explaining all the questions of Maharaj Pariksit, which makes us all understand it so beautifully. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you.
So now I will share the guidebook part. So this chapter, as others, begins with a story summary, which is again very beautifully described in a very conversational, interactional manner, which children love to hear. And even the pictures are so beautifully given that it arouses children's interest to hear more. And then there are key messages which help children to focus on important verses, memorize them, discuss them further, go deep into philosophy. Also, there are understanding the story questions, which will very beautifully, which will help children to assess their understanding, to be able to enjoy the questions, learn the chapter again through these questions in the form of questions. Some of them are, the answers are quite obvious, but others help encourage children to go deeper also. So they are all multiple choice, and children really love when it is done in groups. They answer, and then it's a kind of competition, and they love to answer such questions. Then there are higher order thinking questions, which the teacher or the parent can make a note of even before reading the translation. So it will help the teacher or the parent to be more focused while they are reading translations, and help children to give some prompts and clues to focus more upon these thinking questions, because they help children actually to delve deeper into Srila Prabhupada purports and go deeper into philosophy. Then comes activities. So first is analogy activity, wherein Krishna is compared to sunshine, and wherever there is Krishna, there cannot be darkness. So here children have to, in group or in pairs, they have to discuss, reflect, and question about how, the devotional activities or the devotees can be compared to sunshine, and how they can actually help children to overcome darkness or overcome their negative qualities. So they can give their life example, they can reflect on their devotional practices and discuss these questions with each other. And then there is one very interesting activity wherein children have to interview some devotees and find out their journey of devotion, as in how anybody has come to Krishna consciousness, what has attracted them to come to Krishna consciousness, how do they feel before coming to Krishna consciousness, and how do they feel after coming to Krishna consciousness. So this was a very interesting exercise, which my daughters, after doing these short interviews, they themselves realized that, and they came up with the conclusion that, Mama, it is everybody is answering that once before, and they came into Krishna consciousness, life was very boring and dull and dissatisfying. But however, meaning the same kind of important words were coming. If you can see the summary of 4 interviews, they have done more also, but the summary of 4 interviews they have written here is, everybody is saying, I feel so happy, I feel so satisfied at heart, I made so many new friends and well-wishers. So this way, children are not sharing just their own realization, but they are also reflecting upon realizations of other devotees. No, it make them deeply convinced about the process that they are following, and these activities really help them to take to philosophy and the process positively. And then there are some art activities. This one is visa to different worlds. So here Prabhupada is here. A comparison is given of how when in purport also to verse 14, there is a comparison which Prabhupada emphasizes that how if we want to go to different country, we require certain qualification. We require certain documents are to be provided. We have to qualify ourselves by meeting the requirements of the country that we are going to visit. Similarly, if we are going to higher planets, there also we need to qualify ourselves to be able to meet those requirements, and then only we can enter those higher planets. So here children have to make a collage of making a comparison by how how it is important, how one has to qualify oneself to be able to enter to different higher planets. So this was one collage activity. And then this is very beautiful question thread art, wherein children have to, on a piece of small cardboard, which should not be very thick, because otherwise children will find it difficult to, pierce the needle. And if children are very small, we also get plastic needles, which can be used so that they do not hurt themselves. And on the boundary of question mark, some dots can be made, and on the boundary of the cardboard also some dots are to be made. And then children have to carefully sew the thread from one side and take it out from other side in the manner that they cover both the boundaries and the question mark is highlighted. So this is a very beautiful artistic activity, which my daughter was not very confident about, because for the first time she holded the needle and she tried this activity, but it came out well. So she was very happy and excited to show it to me. And these, so I am so this guidebook activity is actually helping the overall and all-round development of our children. It is not just intellectual, it is moral also, it is spiritual also, it is physical also, it is artistic also. So children are getting perspective into different subjects also while going through these activities. And then there is this dot question mark collage, wherein children can cut circles, small circles of two different colors, and then they can paste the one color, circles can be pasted inside the boundary of question mark, and the other color can be used to paste outside the question mark. However, we had some stars, so my daughters did this activity with stars instead of cutting circles and doing it with that. So this is another variation of it. And then again, this beautiful way of improving the way children write, and a creative way to write also. So all the questions which Pariksit Maharaj asked in this chapter, main questions which children can think of and remember are to be written in this pattern of Q. So it was initially, she found it, the first circle was particularly little challenging. And then when it got a shape, she was able to do the inner parts also. So this is another very wonderful way of encouraging children to be able to summarize their thoughts creatively. And then there are critical thinking abilities and activities, wherein this is a short preaching practice, wherein children can find a friend or a relative or any child who is new to Krishna consciousness, and they can try to encourage, we can keep a conversation between them. It can also be telephonically, and children can be encouraged to answer the questions of the child who has just joined in Krishna consciousness and may have many questions to ask. So this way this can be a preaching activity also. Then there is this activity of emphasizing the importance of Srimad Bhagavatam, and children can summarize the important, the prompt questions are also given, like what is Srimad Bhagavatam full of? What does it mean to fully engage in hearing this Srimad Bhagavatam? Who benefits by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam? What will happen if you constantly read Srimad Bhagavatam? So this is all a presentation to be able to explain and understand and reflect upon what all they are hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, all these chapters. So they can, there are different ways that children can do. They can either present a leaflet, they can, otherwise they can draw a mind map, they can make an index of glorification, or they can make a beautiful flower presentation also of. So she has written 2 shlokas. One she has taken from Bhagavad Gita also, that one has to inquire submissively from the spiritual master. And then she has emphasized on various glories, that it is full of narration concerning the Lord and auspicious for all. If we take it seriously, we will soon have Krishna established in our hearts. Sound incarnation of Lord cleanses the dust of material association. So all these glories, she has tried to compile it together. Not my daughter, some other child has done this activity. Then there are these thought bubbles, wherein children have to think of the questions that Pariksit Maharaj has asked in this chapter, and they have to in a very simplified language, they have to present those questions in their own words. So these are some thought bubbles. Again, it is a beautiful way of helping children to make a chapter summary and understand why these questions are important, because ultimately these questions will follow for entire Bhagavatam. We will have answers to these questions. So then there are some introspective activities like tricking the mind. So here children are very much fond of these optical illusions. So we can help children to give some examples online of various illusions, 3D drawings, and how they create a sense of illusion for children. And then children can further reflect upon how sometimes we also, our eyes also deceive these figures. Similarly, sometimes sometimes it happens that we blame somebody for something which is not that person's fault. So then, this is also a way of how we can do something wrong because our senses can never be perfect. So this is how children can reflect upon how only our senses are dependent on this flickering mind also. So this is another way of understanding how mind tricks us. And then this very nice compare and contrast introspective activity, wherein children are encouraged to go deep and understand how this present education system also, there are modern students who are going to schools and attending education, and how Maharaj Pariksit was also listening to Srimad Bhagavatam from Sukdev Goswami. So what are some of the qualities of Maharaj Pariksit, and what are some of the qualities of modern students which are different, and what are some of the similarities in both of them? It was very interesting to know, meaning the last point which he has written, that Maharaj Pariksit knew that he will die in 7 days. This was different in difference he has written, and they don't know that they will die in 7 days. But the similarity is that both have to die. So this is how children are, getting to the philosophy that death is certain for everybody. Everybody has to die. All right, and then we have these writing activities. Again, a very beautiful way of linguistic development of children. So children have to identify the action words. Understanding is also provided how we can identify what is a verb. And then children have to identify those verbs, and followed by this fill in the blanks, wherein they have to fill in the appropriate word. And then this punctuation practice, wherein they have to put in appropriate punctuation marks. And again, this is also a very nice interesting and very deep writing activity wherein children have to prepare a small booklet kind of, which with questions and answers. It is very beautifully and very simplified way, in a very systematic way it is explained how various steps children can follow to do this. So first of all, they can write down the questions which they can think of, at least 6 questions which they would want to investigate and write about. And then hint is also given how to prepare a book with an introduction and a conclusion. They can also refer to the simple short book of Prabhupada, Perfect Questions and Perfect Answers, and how it is having one introduction and then a conclusion. So how children can prepare one introduction and conclusion, and then those questions, and then inquire from parents or teachers about their questions. The appropriate answer that could also be written, and then the children can make illustrations and make this small kind of a booklet with questions and answers, important questions which Pariksit Maharaj is asking. And then there are sentence writing activity, the connecting words, wherein they have to complete the sentences with appropriate connecting words. And then these keyword activity, wherein they have to identify the part of speech, define it, find the synonym and antonym. So again, a lot of linguistic development happening here. And then they have to unscramble this entire sentence. Very interesting. Children love doing these activities, and not very difficult also. And then there is this, again, a very nice introspective activity of writing a diary, wherein children have to imagine that they are Pariksit Maharaj and they have less than 7 days to live. So they have to write a diary about, what is the effect that they are having upon their consciousness by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And they have to write a small diary entry for it. And then there is this word search activity, followed by the answers to all the questions, understanding story, thought bubbles, activity sheet, punctuation, then keyword scrambled questions, and the older word search. So the answers are also provided so that children can check on that they are following the right direction or not. That's all. Thank you all very much. Now we will open the session for questions. So I am changing the settings so that you can unmute yourself, and participants will please raise their hands for questions so that you can enlighten us. Yes, Atulya Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Arudha Mataji and Rati Krishna Mataji. First question actually is for Rati Krishna Mataji. Mataji, where your children are homeschooled, or you are doing it after they are coming back from school?
Mataji, after they are going to school, so after they come back from school, meaning they finish their school work and then we do it every day.
And are they doing this in a group, or both of them? I see that you have 2 girls, and what are their ages, and do they do along with each other or others?
Mataji, we are doing both ways, meaning they both are doing themselves also. We are going a little faster pace, but I carry these activities in Sunday school also. So there we have a lot of children, and there we are following first canto right now, but here we are we are finishing second canto.
Okay, wonderful.
Because at home we do it every day, whereas in Sunday school we do it only on Sundays. So that is why this difference. But with my daughters, I do it every day. So that is why they are a little ahead than the others.
Great, thank you. My question for Arudha Mataji, it's a little different, Mataji. It's regarding homeschooling, not regarding Bhagavatam. Is that okay to ask?
Yes, yes. I was thinking that if there's more people asking questions, then let's take that and then come back to this. But we will get back. We will come to it. Is that okay?
Thank you, Mataji. Sure.
Yes. Archana Mataji can ask.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you for the wonderful summary of questions. So Mataji, my question would be, so you mentioned beautifully how like peace and satisfaction are symptoms of enjoyment. And then like when one is anxious, we can never have true enjoyment. I mean, I'm not even talking about the enjoyment part, but as such, as parents, like, we have a lot of anxiety about our children. And especially in my case, when I'm beginning to homeschool right now, my anxiety levels are like much higher than before because I'm constantly second guessing myself, and I'm not sure if I'm enough, and I'm always thinking about anxious about such things. So when I contemplate, it is. And I know it is stemming from the fact that subconsciously I'm thinking that okay, somewhere I am responsible for the kids' education. How do I how do we transform this consciousness? To give an example, I get intimidated or insecure when my daughter says that I'm bored. To that extent, when I have this subconscious feeling that okay, I'm responsible for my daughter now that she's going to be from school. So how do I transform this consciousness based on this what you mentioned today? Thank you.
Yeah. So this kind of anxiety is natural for a mother or father towards the child in terms of education. And I think Prabhupada also spoke about how he didn't want to go to school and how his parents, forced him to go to school because it was good for him, right? So, so in the same way, this kind of anxiety is very natural anxiety, and if you don't have that anxiety, then it may be detrimental for the child, right? Now, the question is how to change this anxiety into the proper anxiety where we connect Krishna with it, right? So, yeah, so anxiety is very natural, this kind of anxiety. So the way to do it is to always see them as servants of God, to also always see that the primary goal, why you're sending them to school or why you're educating them, is so that they can serve Krishna. The purpose, ultimate goal is their service to Krishna, and for them to develop love of God. So if you always keep that principle in mind as to why you are anxious and why you want them to have the best education and a safe environment and all those things that generally a mother would feel anxious about, a devotee mother, in terms of following our principles to the best of our ability. All these things have to be done in a way. In other words, they're all meant to help the child, further her advancement, or his advancement towards devotional life. So if you keep that in mind, and sometimes you'll find yourself just not remembering those things, so you just have to bring the consciousness back to the proper consciousness, And yeah, so these anxieties are there, but at the same time, if you put it in the proper perspective, there will be satisfaction. There will be satisfaction. So peace and satisfaction doesn't mean that we do nothing and we are sitting back in this kind of situation where everything is just, like a Mayavadi, he's thinking of peace and satisfaction in that way, merging and just simply experiencing the Brahman aspect, the light. But we are not talking about that. We are talking about proper anxiety, how to change simply materialistic anxiety into anxiety that's dovetailed to Krishna. Okay. And then you will get the peace and satisfaction, because your purpose is not simply to take care of their bodily needs, which is also important, but your purpose is to give them love of Krishna, is to make them nice devotees. And that's why this idea of even if they're going to school is to always keep that in mind, how we still have to make effort to keep their consciousness in Krishna consciousness. That has to that's very important.
Thank you, Mataji. It was very, very helpful. Thank you.
Kalindini Sundari Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Mata, a small question my son asked, and I have no answer for that. Oh, I also try to find out what is the Vyasadev's wife name.
What is what? I didn't get it. It's echoing your voice. What? Well, can you repeat that, please?
What is the name of Vyasadev's wife?
Vyasadev's wife. Oh, anybody knows? Oh yeah, I think, somehow I forget. I actually don't remember. Yes.
Okay. Okay, Mother. Next time you tell me, Mother. Because I try to find out here and there. I also didn't go. This is a good question because lots of things you're reading about Vyasadev. So we want to know more about Vyasadev, everything around him.
Okay.
And Mata, another question is that just let me clear because you see, I'm doing homeschool and some family get like see my kids, they get attracted and they want to talk with me, and of course I give them time also when they want to talk, and they take so many hours, so many things, and finally they figured out it's not possible for them because they're both parents working or something. So from now, if anybody come, I tell them go to Arudha Mataji, a homeschool, this pink color book, read that book. After that, if you have any questions, then I can help because there is every details she put there. So I don't know how to satisfy and what to do as a devotee one side, but they just going to take my time and they're not going to do it. I don't know what to do, Mata.
Okay.
is
So
it?
yeah, this is again a question regarding how to get them to. No, I didn't get that part. Sorry, I didn't get exactly.
No, basically, thing is that some parents they are going to they like my kids how they're doing, and they will come with lots of questions to me,
Mhm.
and then takes of course it's like I give my time before that so much, but now I'm very much in picky on giving time because I saw that they're not work so much. They finally they figure out they cannot do that.
Yeah, yeah. You just have to balance that. You just have to balance that. Okay. You have to use just your, practical, intelligence and see what is best in terms of, because you still have to get things done, the work done, and they have to work as well and do some schooling. So you can leave the questions for later or try to answer what's relevant. So you'll have to do that. Okay.
Okay, and another question about today morning reading about Yudhishthira Maharaj, like when Krishna, when Arjuna went to the Dwarika, he not coming, and then Yudhishthira Maharaj sees some symptoms, of the inauspicious thing. So it's maybe question come that Yudhishthira Maharaj have no peace, means no happy so much because they are pure devotee, but first big calamities came, then Kurukshetra battlefield, and then he become a king, and after that king he become, then Krishna disappeared, then again, how we take that?
Let us wait for this question and let's see if others have a question because we are running out of time very quickly. Is that okay, Kalindi? We
Yes,
can.
ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's wait on this question because it'll take some time.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. There's more questions, I think.
Samarupini Mataji. Yes,
Hare
Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for the wonderful section. I had a question from last week's class, like we're talking about the Varaha avatar. So, but I think, when Varaha avatar, he comes when he kills Hiranyakashipu and when he takes the Mother Earth, from the ocean. So it's at two different times, right? Because I feel that they're always combined. I don't know. Am I wrong in my understanding? I don't know.
Well,
Like,
Varahadev came to kill Hiranyaksha, first of all, not Hiranyakashipu.
Hiranyaksha. Yeah.
So there's two Varaha appearances, and one is at a different time, and that is the white Varahadev, and he comes at a different time. And I don't think the Bhagavatam mentions too much about him, that avatar. But the one that we are concerned with is the Varaha that killed Hiranyaksha, and he took the Mother Earth from the depths of the ocean. This is what we are concerned with. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, but I thought, isn't like, did he put the Mother Earth in the Garbhodaka ocean? I mean, okay.
Yeah.
Because I thought they were two different pastimes. I don't know. Somebody
was
No,
saying.
no, 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 no. He out of mischief, he was just a really demon, and he wanted to do this mischief of plunging the earth in the bottom of the Garbhodak ocean. And when Brahma created the Swambhu Manu and his wife Shatarupa, after the Kumaras rejected household life, he got angry. Okay, and then Lord Shiva came, and then he created he created Swambhu Manu and Shatarupa and asked them to have children. And they said, well, I need a place to live. And then Brahma looked, and Mother Earth was at the bottom of the ocean. And I believe that Hiranyaksha is the one who put it under the ocean. And then as soon as Brahma was thinking, Varahadev appeared from his nose, became bigger and bigger, and took Mother Earth out.
Okay, yeah.
From what I understand, Hiranyaksha is the one who plunged Earth at the bottom of the ocean, because these demons were very, very powerful. They are not ordinary demons, Prabhupada says, that you'll find maybe in the world, but because these were demons who fought with Krishna. So they're and sometimes these demons are described as being very good looking and very powerful and very great. And sometimes we hear words of, praise for them, right? Because they were unmatched in their power and ability to do things. And therefore he was able to do that. He wanted to basically challenge everyone. He was looking for that most powerful personality in his life, right? Remember that story?
Yes.
One day, oh, you were so puffed up. One day you're gonna see your match. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. I just
else wants to clarify that, but this is my understanding.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare
Mataji, now maybe we can have Atulya Mataji's question.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare
So, thank you for all the inspiration for Srimad Bhagavatam and also homeschooling. So I'm at this stage where, my daughter is ahead, and which is usually the case for homeschooling children. And in a local co-op, I inquired about, putting the child earlier in the college, like 2 or 3 years earlier. And actually many people have said against it and saying that if their children went early, they regret. But these are non-devotees. So main question is about their emotional maturity. So I wanted to check with you, Mataji, especially in children, like girls. What is your experience? You have guided so many homeschoolers whose children would have gone earlier into the college, like 2 or 3 years earlier.
Very, very good. Very good question, Atulya. It's just, I don't think that should be the focus of our homeschooling, is how to put children earlier in college and have them graduate quickly. No, I don't think that's the purpose. And definitely we should look at our child's maturity, his or her progress. And you will, and if you feel that she is ready for, for college life, and she's able to take those challenges, nowadays they require many things before you can put her, then yes, you can go for it. But I won't even worry about it as being an important item in homeschooling. Okay. Is that satisfying, or do you have some another question related with this?
Yeah, so academically, since they have a lot of time, they have already advanced. Now what to do next? It's like a eventual step to get them into community colleges, and then for their furthering of their studies. So, but then this question mark comes in the mind whether they eventually would interact with students in the colleges, either community college and then later in a university. So how would that interaction be?
Yeah. I mean, you could, well, if you have nothing more to teach her in terms of academics, in terms of her, and she's going way fast and everything, then what you could do is give her something very, not very challenging, or something simple in college, where she and you can try it out and see how she's doing there in terms of maturity and interaction. But if you feel that she's emotionally not ready for it, and you feel that she's really has a problem interacting with students twice her age, then I would wait. You see, that's another thing, that when my children went early, I could feel that they were ready, even in their maturity, in their in dealing with adults twice their age, you see. So almost, not all of them, but so in other words, you have to make sure that they are okay with interacting with, they're mature enough. And like you said, they may be, sometimes children are different. And and being a girl, and she may, and we don't want to push her on that point. We don't want to push her, because that's not the purpose, that's not the goal, is to put that pressure on that child to do this over ambitiousness is called, right? So this is can be very detrimental for the child. I agree with that. So one has to, when I was doing it, they were taking like one class each time, and they had still enough time to do, their chanting and participate in different festivals. And if those things, if you see that it's going to, it's going to be detrimental, if they won't be having enough time, then I won't, because they're too young to give up everything, these things, need to be connected with all the devotional processes. So yeah, I did it. I took it out really gradually, and for me, it happened accidentally. It was never the goal of homeschooling. So you'll have to watch and see, and you can try out with one class. There's no harm in that, and see how she's doing. And if you feel that is, and you should be in good communication with her when she's going to college and everything. So you can see, and also another yardstick is that you should see that the child is able to manage on her own the class. Like if you have to babysit and you have to spoon feed the content of the class, then that means she's not ready. In other words, she has to be ready to do her coursework. She has to be ready to write her essay or whatever she's doing, whatever the teacher's asking her to do. There should be, some encouragement and some, maybe a little bit of your participation, but not much. Very, very minimal.
Makes sense, Mataji. I would watch out for the yardsticks that you have mentioned.
Yes, like you shouldn't have to help her to do her homework. She should be able to do it herself. And if she's not able to do it herself, she's not ready for college. College means that the student doesn't take homework home for the parent to help the child. Maybe once in a while, yes.
Thank you very much, Mataji. That really helped.
Yes.
That's it, Mataji.
One thing, Atulya, I wanted to mention that we do want to avoid, if you are planning to homeschool, that we don't want to go through, actual school, high school, So we keep on avoiding that. And that's why many devotees think of community colleges, because they're skipping high school, right? And sometimes community colleges could be pretty much like high school, the level of the standard, of education could be high school. The basic level courses could be practically high school. So when she comes to that point, when, even age-wise, then, instead of doing high school privately, you may consider putting her in a community college. You see what I mean? Like when she's ready for high school, technically if she was going to school, she would be doing high school at that age. You could, at that age, she may be ready to go to community college. You see? So I don't know if she's here. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, she needs to unmute.
Yes, Mataji.
Yes. Yes, Mataji, that is.
Oh, we can't hear you again.
There is some technical issue, I think.
Okay. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. Anyway, it's a very long subject, this subject matter. Anybody, is everything, all the questions done then?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Yeah, I think we are past time today, isn't it? No, we're just on time. Thank you all for joining in, and we'll hear from you next week. Hare Krishna.